Naz, Andrew, Soroy, myself, Dave. This is week 10. Happy New Year, gents. Um, I don't know if you guys want to say anything or anything like
Yeah,
that.
happy New Year, everyone, for sure.
The typical, good health, good happiness, and good fortune spiel. You know what I mean? It almost became like a copy and paste, and I'm like, this kind of feels a little weird, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? So you guys know what I mean. I just wish you all the best. Start the new year right with some proper habits and whatnot. Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about AI in the medical field. We're gonna be talking about questioning your beliefs, finding the meaning of life, right, and suffering. Nas?
Yes, suffering and the meaning in life.
Great. And then I'm gonna be talking about getting a story about a guy who ended up becoming one of the best selling, not best selling authors, but a very well, like a decently well known author. I had no idea who he was, but his numbers are pretty good considering where he started. So yeah. All right, who wants to go first?
I can go ahead if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So I was researching AI, and it's like such a big category that I would like have to talk about it for a couple of different weeks. But I was just trying to chop it down, make it in manageable sections. So I started seeing about a lot of research and news coming out of the medical field. So I decided to present on that this week. So AI so far is not some scary robot that's going to take over the Earth yet. And for now, it exists as a computer algorithms that sort, process, and try and form conclusions on data sets. So an example is early detection in the healthcare industry. So researchers in the Google Brain Initiative have instituted technologies based on deep learning, a subset of machine learning, which is a type of AI, to develop a self-optimizing algorithm that can automatically detect diabetic eye disease through photographs. So what they did was they took a database of 128,000 images of people with diabetic eye. They gave it to the AI computer, and they gave it parameters on how to go through the data, and it told it to basically learn to form a conclusion that all 128,000 images represent diabetic eye. So the idea is next time when the computer is looking at another eye, which it hasn't categorized yet, it'll be able to draw certain conclusions and certain things that it learned from the learning to assess whether the person has diabetes or not. So that's like a simple way. So you train it with 128,000 images. Um, for each image, the severity of the grade given is repeatedly compared, and what's known about the larger training set until the algorithm can determine the severity of each picture in each set. So another instance in which AI is being used in the medical industry is with breast cancer. So AI technology could potentially reduce the number and costs of breast cancer surgeries. So according to the data, about 1 in 8 women will develop invasive breast cancer over the course of their lifetime. And while the treatment has come a long way, there is a possibility that surgery can't remove all the cancerous tissue on the first surgery, which can mean the patient returns to the hospital for additional procedures. Um, so 1 in 4 patients require additional surgeries after undergoing their first breast surgery. So, going to AI technology now, what they've done is Perimeter Medical Imaging AI is developing innovative imaging technology embedded with AI to scan breast tissue in minutes, um, with the goal of preventing more surgeries. So basically, what it does is now in the current system, what happens is they do scans, then they operate for breast cancer, and while they're operating for it and removing what they can, maybe they'll find more instances of breast cancer, which they'll have to schedule for a second appointment, for a second surgery. But what this company is doing is during the first surgery, they'll take a picture of the breast tissue, and then while the surgeon is removing the main parts, it'll like run a mock-up itself and see what other parts can also be removed. And instead of having to schedule a second appointment, it can help the doctor do it on the same day that they're performing first surgery. And this is really good for patient care because more cancer is taken out the first time, and it's also better because the patient's body doesn't have to go through a second surgery, and it's good for everybody because it reduces costs. So instead of having two full surgeries, you can have one, and it increases efficiency because the hospital only has to deal with the patient once instead of multiple times, hopefully. Then the third example of AI technology is in London, England, where a hospital called Aidenbrook is the first hospital in the world to use AI technology with Microsoft, cut waiting times for cancer patients, and potentially improve survival rates. So what they've been doing is they've been collaborating with Microsoft Research Cambridge for 8 years to create a project called Inner Eye, which helps to automate radiotherapy preparation, saving clinicians hours of laborious time. So this is coming from one of the doctors there, Dr. Raj Jena, who is also a University Cambridge researcher, said, "I look after patients with cancers of the brain and spine. We do this by using precise radiotherapy treatment to kill off the tumors and save lives. Planning radiotherapy treatment takes many hours, carefully marking up scans in order to direct the radiation to the tumor while shielding healthy structures around the tumor itself. So they scan the person's body and then they have to manually mark where they're going to give radiation and where they're not going to give radiation. When using the AI technology, they are able to train the computers to mark the radiation more quickly. So it's promising that the computer can do what a human does in a few minutes instead of the human taking a few hours to mark where the radiotherapy has to take place. So it's important because they can perform the radiotherapy much quicker and sooner. Um, so instead of a patient having to wait until next week, maybe they can wait until later this week because all the surgeries are going, sorry, all the procedures are going that much faster. Um, so let's talk about accuracy. So the machine learning model developed using the tool needs to be tested and validated in each individual healthcare setting, which was what they've learned from Addenbrooke's University. So let's say that we're studying like hospital patients from Toronto Sunnybrook. They're not necessarily going to line up with the patients in Scarborough General. So what they had to do was, in order to make it so that the data they were drawing wasn't hospital specific, they had to draw data from multiple hospitals and integrate it into the same system. So now that when the computer is looking at information from past patients, it's not just from one hospital, it's from multiple hospitals. So the way they did that was, in the case of this London, UK company, they took a data set of 519 pelvic 3D CT scans and 242 neck and head scans, and they took it from 8 clinical centers from around Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and North and South America. So they're basically teaching the machine not just one hospital's worth of information, but many hospitals, so that the machine could basically do the radiation marking much easier and not just for one hospital. Um, then looking at what AI technology can do for pharmaceutical companies. So as we mentioned, if you give it data and you teach it how to recognize things like diabetic eye, then it can recognize disease identification and diagnosis. It can also help with digital therapeutics, personalized treatments, and behavioral modification. This can effectively use to assist and identify people to provide early insight into conditions such as gum conditions, skin disorders, and treatments with over-the-counter medications. So basically, by like showing it like a human face or something, it'll be able to recognize if you have like a skin rash or something by giving it enough data and teaching it enough. It can also be used for drug discovery and manufacturing. This relates to COVID-19 and helps in the initial screening of drug compounds to be the predicted success rate on biological factors, measuring RNA and DNA quickly, precision medicine or next generation sequencing, helping in the faster discovery of drugs and tailored medications. AI can be helpful in predictive forecasting. Predicting an epidemic is one of the key examples of this topic. Um, AI technologies are also being applied to monitoring, predicting epidemic outbreaks or seasonal illnesses worldwide. A predictive forecast helps plan for our supply chain to get the inventory in the right time. And AI can also be used in clinical trials, identifying the right candidate for the right trial based on history and disease conditions. Um, so now that we know a few practical medical applications of AI, so what is it? Is it hardware? Is it software? In actuality, AI technology used today are machine learning algorithms, statistical engines that can pick up and create patterns from past observations and predict new outcomes, along with other key components such as data sources, experiments, and software. Machine learning algorithms can create AI factories, a set of interconnected components and processes that nurture learning and growth. So AI is a machine learning algorithm, but what is an algorithm? An algorithm is a set of instructions designed to perform a specific task. Um, this can be a simple process such as multiplying two numbers or a complex operation such as playing a compressed video file. Search engines use proprietary algorithms to display the most relevant results from the search index for specific inquiries. In computer programming, algorithms are often created as functions. These functions serve as small programs that can be referred to by a larger program. For example, an image viewing application can include a library of functions that use a custom algorithm to render different image file formats. So basically, all AI is a computer algorithm, basically a small computer program that's used to go over data and create an answer or look for some patterns or, irregularities. So, what is an AI factory? So, an AI factory is you need to get a few components together. You need quality data obtained from internal and external sources, and this data trains the machine learning algorithm to make predictions on a specific task. In some cases, such as diagnosis and treatment of diseases, these predictions can help humans experts in their decisions. In others, such as content recommendation, machine learning algorithms can automate tasks with little or no human intervention. The algorithm and data driven model of AI allows organizations to test new hypotheses and make changes that improve their system. This could be new features added to an existing product or new products built on top of what the company already owns. The changes in turn allow the company to obtain new data, improve AI algorithms, and again find new ways to increase performance, create services and products, and create growth in the organization. In essence, an AI factory creates a virtuous cycle between user engagement, data collection, algorithm design, prediction, and improvement. So, what kind of data is needed for AI? It is known fact that machine learning algorithms rely heavily on mass amounts of data. The value of data has given rise to idioms such as data is the new oil, a cliche that has been used in many articles. But large volumes of data alone do not make for good AI algorithms. In fact, many companies sit on a vast storage of data, but their data and software exist in separate silos, stored in an inconsistent fashion and incompatible models and frameworks for AI. So a customers, even though customers view the enterprise as a unified entity, internally the systems and data across the units and functions are typically fragmented, thereby preventing the aggregation of data, delaying insight generation, and making it impossible to leverage the power of analyticals and AI. An example of this within my own company is that most of the customer information is on Salesforce, and then past a certain point, then the information goes into QuickBooks. So even though the information is all together in one place, it's not easy for the AI to go through Salesforce and then QuickBooks and then pull the information together. So that's an example of how a company has lots of information, but it might not be all put together properly for AI. Furthermore, being fed to AI algorithms, data must be pre processed. For instance, you may want to use the history of past correspondence with clients to develop an AI powered chatbot that automates part of your customer service. In this case, the text data must be consolidated, tokenized, stripped of excessive words and punctuations, and go through other transformations before it can be used to train the machine learning model. Even when dealing with structured data such as sales records, there may be gaps of information and other inaccuracies that need to be resolved. And if the data comes from various sources, and it needs to be aggregated in a way that doesn't cause inaccuracies. Without pre processing, you'll be training your machine learning model on low quality data that will result in AI systems that perform poorly. And finally, internal data sources may not be enough to develop the AI pipeline of your company. Sometimes you'll need to complement your information with external sources such as data obtained from social media, stock markets, news sources, and more. So, in the example of the hospital, they couldn't just take medical data from their own hospital, they had to integrate medical data from international hospitals as well. An example is Blue Dot, a company that uses machine learning to predict the spread of infectious diseases. To train and run its AI system, Blue Dot automatically gathers information from hundreds of sources, including health organizations, commercial flights, livestock health reports, climate data from satellites, and news reports. Much of the company's efforts and software is designed for gathering and unifying the data. The last point I'll make is that the data, the quality of data that we give the computers is really important because, for example, I'm sure people have heard of unequal loan situations in the United States, whereas in some neighborhoods, people of specific backgrounds and races are able to get loans easier than other people. So what happens is when you input the previous data showing that, for example, all pink people should not get loans and all purple people should get loans. Now, when you train the computer to do this, every time it finds a pink person, it becomes racist because information that we provided the AI was racist. So it's really important of the quality of data to ensure that we don't create AI problems such as racism in data sets because of the racism that the humans that are programming the AI will cause. And yeah, that's what I had for this week.
That's a pretty important thing to note, is that the AI is only as good as the programming of it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But okay, so wait, let's recap real quick. So there are AI programs that are able to detect pandemics prior to them happening,
Well, no,
or they're
not that it's
working on it.
available now,
Okay,
but
okay,
that's what they're working on. Yeah.
that's crazy. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for that. I like that you come with, like, we all come with like completely random things that we wouldn't be exposed to. So I know AI is kind of similar to virtual reality in the sense that it can be brought up in the same kind of breath, but still, it's very cool.
Yeah, because everyone's looking at it as like an evil robot that's going to take over the world, but for now, it's going to help us like process our data much better.
I mean, I saw this like post on IG yesterday, I think, of like a robot in like 2009, and it was like just like walking, but it could like, it looked a little weird. Then 2019, and it was like able to jump across gaps, so it was like evolved a little bit. And then they're like 10 years in 2029, and they show the Terminator robot. So yeah, I'm curious to see what our lifetime holds for the evolution of machine learning, AI, and even like just robotics. Because I think when we're old, they might, like in our lifetime, I can almost say with certainty that there's going to be some sort of huge gap that's filled. What do you guys think?
I agree. I also think that just like Andrew mentioned, people are afraid of the machines taking over and stuff like that. I think that's a long way away because I think like the form or people that expect AI to be is kind of like deceptive, and that's pretty far away. I don't think AI is going to be truly like um intelligent for a very, very long time. I think the AI that we have right now and that we see in the future is more based on machine learning. So it still takes a lot of human help for it to do very like even limited things. Whereas like a more general and vast scope of AI, I think is more in the future long term.
It's good.
Like Cortana from Halo or something like that type of intelligence is way into the future. Everything right now is literally like very human assisted. You cannot like go to an AI and say any existing AI and say, hey, like uh learn, like tell me what this book says, or like, well, I guess you can, but like how does the stock market work or something like that. It doesn't really think on its own, and even then like machine learning is kind of still like people conditioning that that program. It doesn't really think for itself.
So one is relating to that. One of the streams that I was watching today mentioned consciousness. So like the one way where AI will become like this robot that takes over the world is if it becomes conscious. So I guess I'll talk about that a little bit more next week about how perceive consciousness and how technology can perceive that as well, because they need that as well for them to start taking over the world, kind of thing.
And that reminds me of something else then. About like 3 years ago, Facebook, I think it was, created, they were like working on machine learning, and they created like two different like I guess computers uh to work on the machine learning, or I guess AI, I'm not sure which it was. And they developed their own code between the two computers. And literally Facebook had to shut it down because it was kind of not safe.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah, they were talking to one another, right?
Yeah, in their own
Yeah,
language.
and we couldn't
Created.
understand. Yeah, they were reacting to one another. It was in a
Yeah.
farm of computers, or AIs or whatever, and these two isolated ones started speaking to one another. But like, did they shut it down? You know what I mean? I think they just,
Exactly.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
that's yeah.
they,
Yeah, knowing companies like that, they probably try to exploit whatever it is.
yeah,
Like,
or they're just like, let's tell
So what you're
everyone that.
saying is Zuckerberg's a robot. He's already
yes,
AI.
that too. Yeah.
um, yeah, maybe he's just chilling somewhere, and what we see is really, I don't know. Who knows?
You
But
can tell by how he blinks. That's the giveaway.
And that guy, it's so memey, and like I feel so bad for the guy because like that's just how he like looks. It's so funny the way he looks at things. That's where I think it comes from. His stare and his blinks for sure.
but even
That's
that
because he's
And
already a
sunscreen
robot.
photo.
that too.
He's the third robot.
Poor
um
guy.
but yeah, like I wouldn't put it past them to be like, hey, let's tell everyone that we're shutting it down. Let's create an isolated, safe environment for us to test this in, and let's not tell anyone about it because we want to be, the sooner we bridge this knowledge gap, uh the bigger the gap we create between us and anyone else that wants to do it. So let's just tell them that we shut it down. Who knows? I don't know.
Agreed.
Yeah. Like,
Um,
I don't think every single government would agree not to run that experiment
correct.
if they thought they can get a leg up over someone else.
Yeah. I mean, we're just, I hate to say it, but we're kind of sheep when it comes to that stuff, right? Like we're nowhere near the access of information of what's actually going on.
Well, if you look at history too, like it's just honestly that's how companies and governments move. Like, didn't we take in Nazi scientists after the war? We also took in, the whole thing between Japan and China, where like uh Japan was like testing on Chinese when they were fighting. They were testing on Chinese prisoners, like if they would like rape the women and see if STDs passed down to children. They tried all these horrendous things and took notes of it. And then the Americans like took in those scientists and their notes also. Like people are gonna take advantage of it for sure. Like we were talking about VR the other day too, and like the reason the Oculus Rift 2 is $500 compared to like $1,000 headset is because Facebook makes money on the back end from what you do on your headset, and that's why you have to log in on your headset. Facebook is notorious for that, for
and yeah,
collecting information.
any of the things where it's like login with Facebook on the surface level, it's just like, oh, I don't need another login, which is true. It makes it convenient, but again, they do that to collect information. So
It's yeah, their business model.
yeah, it's interesting. Very smart. It's super smart. Um, I got a question in the chat about interdimensional gateways. We went from AI to this. So gateways to different dimensions and shit. I mean, you hear about that in like movies and stuff. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Well, like, I might just do some research on that this week and maybe talk about it briefly next week. So if anyone else wants to do that, that's cool too. I'm getting a comment that Facebook is a speck compared to TikTok. I don't know though, because Facebook owns WhatsApp and Instagram as well. So I think those and Facebook. So Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, I think as a collective, do they have more of a user base than TikTok? Let's see. Let's Google that real quick. TikTok user base.
But
In no,
TikTok is owned by China, so who knows what kind of data profile they can create on their citizens.
that's true. 800 million active users worldwide. Wait, TikTok's Chinese,
Jesus.
but is it banned in China? I thought it was banned there. No, I could be
No.
wrong. I could be wrong.
No,
This is thanks mainly to China's social media video craze.
the Donald Trump was threatening to ban it if they didn't give
That's
some
what it
sort of
was.
American ownership.
That's what it was.
Yeah, I thought Microsoft weren't they looking to acquire? I don't know if that like fizzled out or not.
Wow, Facebook continues to reign strong as the king of social media with 2.5 billion active users as of April 2020. That means nearly 2 out of every 3 of the 3.8 billion active social media users are active Facebook users. I don't use Facebook at all unless it's Messenger for the people that I don't have cell phone numbers with. And then I'm like,
I
yo,
would.
it literally it's because they don't have cell phones or they give me their cell phone and we get off of that.
That's exactly it. I literally have Facebook just in case I get lost in Mexico somewhere sometime and I don't know anyone's phone number. I can literally log onto Facebook and like get help.
That's a good idea. Um, they were saying that Zuckerberg might integrate the two or three of them, like Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So
They're trying to
I mean,
break up.
he's doing that now, right?
I don't know. I
They
guess
had
so.
like you can message people on Facebook through Instagram, but it's like super weird and like
Yeah,
not intuitive at all, and just not a good feature. But
it's
they're
sketchy.
trying it.
I think like there's dozens of states currently um suing Facebook like right now.
For
There are a
what?
couple dozen states. They're trying to destroy Facebook right now
Oh,
Yeah,
because they're too much of a monopoly.
that's the only risk investing in like a company like Google or Facebook is like if the government decides to like
Yep.
shut them down or like restrict them. But besides that, I can't see any company that big going away just because of how well they like will pivot, how well they like update their platform. Like Facebook, like bought WhatsApp, they bought Instagram. Like they're really good at adapting to the marketplace.
Mhm.
So it's hard to see Facebook going away unless the government just shuts them.
yeah. But even then, I think the government is like, oh, cool, you're American, like the American government. So that's good. You know what I mean? Let's keep it like in our home soil. But the other thing is like those companies get so big that they have such an influence on politics and the government that it's going to be very difficult for them to go away or disappear. Um,
That's above my pay grade.
for now, eventually you're going to find out. And you're going to let us know all about that. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so cool. Who wants to go next?
I can go if Sorori's okay with it. If
Yeah.
Dave and Sorori. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
go for it. Sorry.
So yeah, I've been doing this program with Dave. This week, midweek, pretty much just ended with probably my favorite part of the what will be my favorite part of the program, which is like the philosophy part. They talked a lot about Nietzsche, and uh, he talks a lot about like just the structure of life, um, which I really really enjoy. This is from one specific video, labeled not labeled, but it talked about the suffering in life and the need for meaning. I just took a couple of notes, which I'm just going to read off, so I'll just jump into it. Nietzsche says, gradually, man has become a fantastic animal that has to fulfill one or more conditions of existence than any other animal. Man has to believe, know from time to time why he exists. His race cannot flourish without periodic trust in life. Another philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer said that the inevitability of suffering combined with the awareness of the inevitability of death creates a need for meaning to life, which helped Nietzsche come to the conclusion that a need for the meaning of life is intimately related to the need for meaning to suffering. He says, man, the bravest of animals and the one most accustomed to suffering, does not repudiate suffering as such. He desires it. He even seeks it out, provided he's shown a meaning for it, a purpose of suffering. The meaninglessness of suffering, not suffering itself, was the curse lay over mankind so far. Um, Thus, the meaning of life comes from the fact that life is filled with suffering, pain, loss, fear, anxiety, and does not end in happiness but in death. So, in order to endure the hardships of human existence, it is necessary for individuals to believe that their suffering has purpose. Um, there are moments in people's lives where they experience complete serenity and joy. However, these are exceedingly rare experiences throughout life. But when it does happen, the intensity of it leaves a permanent mark on people's minds. People create a dichotomy of these blissful experiences and everyday boredom and suffering. This creates a desire to live a life with only those blissful experiences and drives people to work perpetually towards their desires and goals in hopes that their pain and suffering will disappear from life and they will be left with the lasting happiness. However, everlasting happiness is an illusion, and people soon realize that this utopian happiness is an impossibility rather that as humans suffering as human suffering seems to be an inescapable part of life with complete relief from it only possible with death. Um, this is a very pessimistic view of life, and Nietzsche believed that pessimism was a preliminary form or doorway to nihilism, which is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. He says that people that arrive at this stage have two options. The first option is to claim that since life is filled with pain and suffering and ends in complete annihilation, that life is meaningless. Basically, a person becomes an existential nihilist. This option is avoided by most people as the meaning, meaninglessness of life can leave one bedridden and depressed, unable to strive or work towards anything. The second option, which is more favorable, is nihilism is not a pleasant state for one to experience. The second option involves degrading this earthly experience uh, and believing in the existence of a superior reality like heaven of Christianity or Pluto's world of forms. Nietzsche referred to this option as an escape from nihilism. He goes on to say that we should escape and pass judgment on this world for being deceptive and to invent a world beyond it, a true world. This option staves off nihilism by condemning this world as inferior and deceptive. He claims that a more valuable and true world exists, apart from this earthly reality. A true world is a alternate utopian world, a reality filled with happiness, bliss, and truth. It gives meaning to life by claiming that even though this earthly existence is for the most part a miserable ordeal, by living right, one is able to enter a true world and obtain that which all human beings want, a life filled with indestructible happiness and joy. Um, so to basically sum up everything, Nietzsche's point is that life is filled with suffering and pain. This leads to one to seek this leads to one to seek meaning to life, which is the same quest to seek meaning to suffering. This quest can lead to nihilism and basically early death, or it can lead to a true world, which negates the idea of nihilism by creating an identifiable purpose for life along with all the suffering too. And I guess I'll finish and leave with a quote by Nietzsche. One must be sustained in suffering by a hope so high that no conflict with actuality can dash it, so high indeed that no fulfillment can satisfy it, a hope reaching out beyond this world. That's basically it.
That quote went over my head again. Can you say it again?
Yep.
Yeah, please. 'Cause when I was in that
Or-
section of the fucking course, man, it
Yeah,
was so hard to understand some of the concepts,
yeah.
the quotes.
They speak differently in that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Go ahead. Can you repeat it again, please?
Yep. So one must be sustained in suffering by hope so high that no conflict with actuality can dash it.
Ah,
So
okay.
high, yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
So high indeed that no fulfillment can satisfy it. A hope reaching out beyond this world.
I see.
So
Okay.
basically, I feel like he's saying that, um, and I feel like there's probably a couple core ways you can boil down people's like existence or like what it should be. And in this sense, it's saying that like you just want to be on a journey and pursue something that you can never attain. And that journey of trying to pursue something that you're never going to attain, I don't know, maybe it's distracting you from suffering, whatever it's doing, it keeps you in a mind state that Nietzsche believes is going to be the most happiest for an individual.
Because it keeps pushing you forward.
Yep.
And it's something bigger than like yourself, which is your life, right? And
Correct.
yeah, nihilism's like yeah, it's kind of I don't know. It's
Scary as hell. I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't know what it
yeah.
was till this, but I found it very interesting that he has the two contrasts that not only do you want to ascertain something that uh transcends your suffering, but you also you never want to achieve it. It has to like it has to transcend like what you can achieve, what you're capable of, like something so big, especially that it's worth pursuing, but that you can never achieve it. It's not just about avoiding happiness. It's also about never attaining that. Uh, it can never be fulfilled because once it's fulfilled, like you're in the same spot
You're
again.
in a point of meaningless. Like what now?
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So, okay. So we should just strive to become Super Saiyans then. You're telling me
Basically, yeah.
because then we'll never attain it, but it'll keep us going forward. Um, I
That's
like.
another.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll go after.
No, go. Go. It's your time. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that like that's another problem with people is that they probably think that they can do everything, whereas like I think once you come to the realization that there's only so much that you can do, um, even then it's very hard. Like life is very short. There's not a lot you're gonna achieve, even if you give it your full. Not that there's not a lot you're gonna achieve, but you only have so much time with short life. So it's like, uh, honestly, I don't even know where I'm going with this.
No, no.
Sorry.
I know what you mean. I and one of the other things with Nietzsche is that you mentioned it was that he kind of questions any of the arguments that he makes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So he'll
Yep.
say one thing, then say another, and like I don't know if I should say it now or after Soroy goes, because he talks about like religion for a bit, right? He
Yep.
talks about religion, the adoption of science in the Western culture, and he questions religion, right? So he attacks it from all angles, and he's just like, hey, I'm not saying one thing's right or wrong. I'm just giving you different ways to look at things. You can pick and choose whatever the hell you want. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. I'll get into that in a bit. Get a comment from
Yeah.
one of the users saying, from what I've learned in my entire life, the existence of any living being, from a tiny bacteria to a giant whale, has always been to gain experience in different forms, learn the good and the bad, know what it is to live in different situations, and in the end learn and perceive knowledge to keep learning. Knowledge and experience is like two sides of a coin. You cannot possibly know either one without the other. Learning and growing. That's super interesting.
Very.
What kind of philosophers do you have
Yeah.
viewing your channel?
Frostbite underscore X99 is a philosopher. I like it. Thanks for sharing that.
And when I said there was like different like cores to like how people live their lives, like this is one. Like another one I could probably say with certainty is like, you know, to reproduce, like that's one of the main purposes to life, in my opinion. Like it's just that that's how life evolved. That's like how the blueprint has been for like us for like the longest time. Even if you never had any other forms of existence, like reasons for existence, the most basic one is reproduction. Even if you did nothing, even if humanity as a whole did nothing, um, at least they reproduced and continued to get to a point where a higher level of like meaning or existence could be discovered. So, like he said too, like the guy on your Twitch, like there's, I believe there's at least a couple core reasons for like existence and like life,
mhm.
as basic as it might be.
I think that outlook, like people genuinely adopt that outlook on life or something similar to that. That you can always strive to learn about everything, but you have to be okay with not knowing everything.
Hmm.
And that kind of vulnerability, I think there's a lot of strength in it. Do you know
I
what I
agree.
mean? When you approach it from the right angle, like it's okay. It's okay that you're not going to accomplish that goal, but the thing is, you're going to get a lot farther. And again, this is another parallel. You're going to get a lot farther setting a large goal than someone who sets a smaller goal and attains it,
Right.
right? So
And it's all relative too. When you say like a large goal or like achieving something, like you said, someone that thinks they're only going to get to step two and only plans for step two, the most they'll probably ever get to is probably step two or around step two. But if you plan for step 100, you know, you're going to get a lot further than step two. Um, and like you said, it's all relative. So I forgot what I said, but I was saying that, um, that, what was I saying? I
well,
have such
goals
bad.
and person that reaches step two. That okay.
Yeah, no, sorry, earlier before that
Oh,
about um people like trying to cheat stuff. Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to say, sorry.
hmm, that's fair. Um,
And one thing that I really liked what you're saying was, I can't say the exact words that Nas said, but you said something along the lines of, sometimes people get depressed when they ponder the reason for existence.
Yep.
I've experienced that myself
Same.
when I was younger. I would like think about it like this was the way I was framing it. That was completely the wrong way. The wrong way was we spend 22 years getting education. Then most people need more education. Then after that, you're going to work for 40 to 60 years.
Yep.
Then after that, you're going to be 70, 80. You're not going to be in the best health, but you'll be done accumulating your money. So now's the time in which you enjoy yourself. When I was looking at through that lens, I was like, yo, this capitalism, this lust for money, this and that, and I was like seriously depressed me. But then I had to rephrase it to, yeah, that's part of the journey, but then the more important part of the journey is like whatever I want to do. Like it's a blank Microsoft Paint page, and I can like make whatever picture I want in terms of if I want to customize cars or if I want to help homeless people or whatever I want to be. So, but then when I was younger and I was analyzing it from the basic point of view, where you just like work and you die, it was very depressing. So for other people who are going through that, you know, exactly what Nat said, you have to find a cause that's bigger and you can accomplish and focus on that instead of focusing on like the menial things we have to do, I guess.
Totally agree. Went through the same thing for sure.
Um, so Wicked said that he dropped an Elon Musk quote. And he's like, "Don't wait to complete a 10-year tasks in 10 years. Ask yourself, how do I complete a 10-year tasks in 6 months? You might fail, but you'll be a lot further than simply accepting you had 10 years." Or compared to the person who's gonna patiently go after something and say, "I have 10 years to do this. It's okay." But at the same time, because these are dichotomy opposing things, that I will also say that you never want to underestimate the power of compound interest. And by compound interest, I don't mean from a monetary perspective solely. I mean also small wins every day. Like if you take a small step towards a larger goal every day genuinely, and you focus on being 1% better than you were yesterday, you're gonna be a weapon at the end of a year, right? So
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people think about the future, they never take into effect like that what you just said, basically compound interest. It's like, hey, I can do this in like 5 years, I'll be here. It's like, no, if you're doing these things every month, every day, like within a year or two, like they're all gonna compound off each other, and you'll be a lot farther in 5 years than you just thinking about this one dynamic that's gonna get you here in 5 years. And like that reminds me of another quote. I think it's by Warren Buffett, where like he says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5 years.
mm-hmm. And time is such an interesting thing. Like today, I did that workout, the daily workout, the quickest I've ever done, and it's day 23. You know what I mean? Because I would just be like, okay, like the run's gonna take me 10 to 15 minutes. The other stuff's gonna take me like another half hour or whatever. Today I literally was like, oh fuck, I have to get ready for this podcast. Like I have 30 to 45 minutes to get all of this done. Let's make it happen. And eventually, like, so I finished the run in like 8 minutes and 50 seconds, which was my top time so far in the last 23 days. Granted, it was on the concrete, so I don't know, got extra sleep today, whatever it is. And then the push-ups and the sit-ups, I started looking at it differently because you have to do 140 now. So I was like, okay, instead of going like, oh fuck, I have to do 140, when I get to 70, I'm only halfway. Like I've already set myself up for failure there by creating a daunting image of the goal. Rather than that, I'm like, okay, what's the max amount of sit-ups I can do in one sitting? Right? 60 is the highest I've ever been able to do in one set. So I was like, okay, well, why don't I just break it down, go 50, 40, 30, 20. 50 plus 40 is 90, plus 30 is 120, plus 20 is 140. I'm like, oh, okay, so forget about the rest that I have to do. Let's just focus on the 50 now. Finish the 50. And then, Bryce, thank you for that. Can you not do that for the podcast? Never mind. I'm not going to explain it. But what he did was he used a Twitch feature that plays a loud scream, and which people do that when I play a horror game to scare me. And I was like, where the fuck did that come from just now?
Where'd you hear it?
I only heard it because I'm the streamer right now, but
see.
people on YouTube are gonna hear it too. They're like, what the fuck was that? So sorry about that, YouTube. Bryce, please don't do that during this. But what was I saying again? Yeah, so 50, 40, 30, 20. Just focus on what you're doing there. So don't worry about the next 3 sets that I have to do. Just worry about the 50, get that done, rest. Okay, now I just have to do 40. Then I have to don't worry about the 30 and the 20. And I did that for the sit-ups too, and it was just way easier and way quicker instead of sitting there like, oh fuck, I could only do 20 right now, and I have to do another 120. So yeah, it was good.
I think that comes back to like, as cliche it is, like mindset and like, in the program they talk about the narrative you tell yourself. Like it's just whatever you're telling yourself, uh, it's gonna create that outcome. It's like, man, I just did 50. I'm starting to fucking feel it. Uh, and you're telling yourself, and subconsciously you're telling yourself like it's kind of a negative experience, so it's gonna suck the rest of like the 70, um, the 70 push-ups or 90 push-ups. Whereas like you said, if you set yourself up mindset wise, it's like you can kind of blast through it.
Yeah. And even the run, like I used to never look at my phone while I was running. Now that I run the on the pavement, because I don't have like a set thing. When I was running on the field, I would run to the field and then run 5 laps around the field, and then walk home, and then finish up a hill and then walk home, and that would equate to between 1.2 to 1.2 miles ish. Now I'm like, hey, like I need to know when to turn back, so I'm constantly looking at my phone, and I was like, okay, cool, like I just need to get to point 0.5, then I turn around and then run back, and it just seemed a lot more manageable. And like Prince was saying in the comments, he says I look at a 20-minute run as 4 5-minute runs or 2 10-minute runs.
Agreed.
So yeah, very cool. Soroy, did you want to go next? Did you want me to go next and you end off? How do you want to do it?
No, I'm good.
Go for it.
Cool. And so my part's a little bit shorter because the book that I'm reading this week, and I kind of wish I did my part just based off that last issue, is the book called like Unfuck Yourself. And it seems to be more about like negative self-talk and like choosing your words very carefully. But for some reason, I thought you guys wouldn't be interested because I feel like most of us have decent self-talk. But based off that last part, maybe I'll do it next week. But because like some of the words he talks about is like the words you use play such a big impact on your life that we have to be very careful with how we choose them. So instead of like he was saying like one small thing that I'll say and then I'll talk about more next week was he talks about why most New Year's resolutions fail or why most goals in general fail is because we use the words I'm gonna do this next year or um, when the new year starts, I'm gonna do this. So we're using the word like I will go, like I'm going to, and instead of using like assertive words like I am this person, like you're not gonna say that I will start running in the future. You say I am a runner, and you
Mm.
change your identity. And so like being very selective with your words, can change like how you view things. Because like as you say, like you just like telling yourself that a run is gonna be very difficult. You're already putting yourself in a mindset that's gonna like exhaust you and drain you versus like putting yourself in a mindset that can kind of like give you more energy to like put things.
Oh man, so
Uh,
like just to like quickly chime in there, I think you like absolutely share any of that stuff, like the self-talk stuff. Even if you believe that we have like good self-talk, like you never know, the refresher could be life-changing. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
one
That's
thing
why
I'll
I'm reading the book.
yeah, no, please do not hesitate. Like if you're like, yo, there's a 5% chance that these guys are gonna get value from it, fucking do it. You know what I mean? You never know.
Hmm.
But like real quick, like you're absolutely correct. Like one thing that I dread right now is getting out of bed. Like give myself every excuse to snooze right now, and the reason for it is because I have to get up and I get this workout out of the way. And just the thought of going outside and running in the cold first thing when I get up is not it's not nice. It's not fun, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then I end up snoozing for like an hour or two, and then I end up doing it anyway. Now, on one end, is my body just yearning for more rest? Maybe. But what's more likely? I just don't want to fucking do it, and I just delay it and delay it and delay it until I do it. Then I feel great. So I think I could definitely use a refresher and just telling myself, hey man, you can do this. You've done it 23 times already. You can do this in 8 minutes. You'll feel better about yourself. That kind of stuff. Instead of, oh fuck, I gotta get this done. You know what I mean? And I think one of the things that's important about your mindset is getting your mindset conditioned to feel the way that you feel after you accomplish something before you do it, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
giving yourself a teaser of that. Yo, I feel like a champion. I just did 140 push-ups and sit-ups, and I ran a mile today. Like that feeling. I need to train myself to feel a little bit of that before I go and do the workout that day so that it gets me out of bed. So yeah, please, if you could share that for next week, that would be amazing.
Also
Yeah.
on the flip side, sorry, I just want to say real quick, what you just said, Dave. On the flip side of like envisioning what the end result looks like, I also feel like leveraging the end result once you do it is very, very important because like a lot of times, like I feel like I can't do the push-ups, but once I do it, I'm like, man, like I'm sitting here right now and like I could probably do like 20 more. This isn't as bad as I thought it was, and like I try to remember that for the next time.
Mm. Yeah, and like you're absolutely correct. Like we started with 100 and now it's like at 140 per day, and I'm just
Yep.
like it went from 100 to 110, 120, then 140 on week 4, I think it is. And I was like, "Oh, I fucking bumped 20 right now." I'm even scared to look at what week 9 has to hold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it might even go up to 200, but again, we're conditioning ourselves, so we'll be good. But yeah, good refresher. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, and like what you mentioned, like that was like a part of the Mark Manson book I read last, where he talks about the feeling brain and the thinking brain and how to change, like how to use your thinking brain to change your feeling brain is by tapping into those emotions. So like you can logically tell yourself that you want to do something, but unless you use your feeling brain, you won't make a change. So like kind of like tapping into like remembering how good it feels once you're done a task is a way that you can do that. Like you can logically make yourself feel a certain way to change behavior,
Hmm,
and that's an effective way to do it. So I thought it was a good point.
cool. Thanks for
So
reminding me.
going to the yeah, so going to the thing I actually talked about. So it is the book called Unlearn: 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life by Humble the Poet, who's actually like a local author, which is pretty cool. So this chapter is let's talk about your beliefs. And he ends the chapter saying that this might not be the most popular chapter in the book and that he's okay with that because even if people don't see things his way, it's an opportunity to kind of grow and leave your comfort zone. So the book talks about like what your beliefs are, and simply beliefs are opinions that we don't particularly want to reconsider. So all they are just other opinions, but we just never reconsider them. So a belief can be like what's your favorite team, like your political beliefs, spiritual, or just simply rules for life that we just don't reconsider. So you might think like having a house, like a clean house, like or like a messy house, like those are just beliefs about life. So the issue is that we actually take pride in our beliefs and we attach our identity to our belief. So once this happens, we no longer differentiate between the belief and ourselves. So, like, let's say someone questions your beliefs. This is why it feels like a personal attack because you identify as this belief now. So, these beliefs can kind of become like a comfort zone. And the issue with this is once it becomes a comfort zone, it also becomes a graveyard for personal growth. And the worst part is, most of our beliefs are handed down to us. They're given to us by our family, friends, the media, culture, or society. So the beliefs we have, because we live in Canada, are very different than the beliefs that people in China will have on average, just because of where we grew up. So once we have these beliefs, we use confirmation bias to kind of strengthen them. So it's almost like we only look for information that will confirm what we already believe is right. And this is why with like social media and like these echo chambers, because we use confirmation bias, these social media algorithms know this and they will keep feeding us information that confirms what we already believe. And that's why you can like we see now with like the last political campaigns where like how radical people are getting. It's because they're only seeing information that confirms their own beliefs, which is why everyone thinks they're right. And if we cannot kind of take a step back and realize this, this is when we can go down those like really bad rabbit holes where like we have two very polarized sides thinking the other sides just don't understand anything. But like you have to understand that they believe that because that's the only stuff that they're seeing at the moment. So this doesn't mean that we have to let go of all our beliefs, but instead we just want to reevaluate them and see if these are the ones that are actually serving you or are they fighting against you and your goals. So one belief that we don't consider often is our belief with money. So I was thinking like we just adopt these beliefs from our parents. So this can be dangerous because for a lot of people, money is a root of like shame, like ignorance and fear. And it's like a very uneducated aspect of our life that plays such a big role in it. So one belief that I changed personally was like the idea that being cheap is expensive. Because like let's say that like as a son of immigrants, like we kind of grow up where like saving money is everything, and like we can kind of fall in this like trap where we just look at the price and we're looking very short term. But like this like quote that I read, that like being cheap is expensive, really changed my view on it, because how often do you buy something that's like very cheap and then it breaks, so now you have to replace it? And not only that, you have to like buy items multiple times. It's also the time and energy it takes to go buy it now. And now you got to rethink about like you got to go back on Amazon, look at reviews and spend all this time. So it would have just made more sense to spend a little bit more money, got the higher quality product, and not have to go through this process of like saving like 10-20% and then spending more time in the future on it. Um, And what else did I want to say? Yeah, because if we fail to account for all the hidden costs of our actions, we can be spending more money than we otherwise thought. So this is just like one belief that I think people should kind of reevaluate and see if it's serving you or not serving you. And then he kind of ends off the chapter with just like reminding you that you are not your beliefs. You can always like let go of your beliefs if they're no longer serving you, because sometimes our beliefs are like anchors that are holding us back from more learning. And then second thing I kind of wanted to talk about this week is like asset allocation, and like looking at your financial portfolio. Because like currently for me, with crypto doing so well, I realized that like my portfolio was not weighted properly anymore. Um, and because of that, like my portfolio is much riskier than I would like. So I just like did a quick thing. I want to like look into like what kind of asset allocation I should be looking at. And even though I logically know that I should re-diversify my portfolio, it's really hard to like sell like let's say a stock or like a cryptocurrency that's been doing really well for you. So this has been like a little personal challenge. But like my little like thing on asset allocation. Um, if you don't know, asset allocation is the idea of how you want to diversify your portfolio. And like the most simplified version is like what's the like percentage split of stocks, bonds, and cash. And then if you're looking a little bit more complex, then you have like your real estate, you have commodities like gold, silver, oil, like T-bills and other assets. But on the most basic level, it's like how many like what's your percentage in like stocks, bonds, and like for me, I guess now crypto and cash. And I was like thinking that I want to like re-diversify, because like let's say something like if Bitcoin goes down a lot, am I okay with those kind of like risk and returns? I'm trying to learn from like last time crypto market kind of blew up. So the idea that today, after like a lot of like thinking, I'm like, I'll sell 10% of my portfolio, I'll put it towards stocks, and then feel a little bit better. But still something I'm thinking about now, because I would like to get it a little bit lower and just take the more um, secured path. Because like based off your like asset allocation, it'll be more important than like your stock selection. And then like I looked up some numbers, and they're saying like if you had an 80% stock, 20% bond portfolio during 2000 to 2002, during that like .com bubble pop, your portfolio would have been down 34% over 2 years. And if you're at like a 50% stocks, 50% bonds, you'd be at a 13.8% down over 2 years. So you'd be doing like almost a third. Like you would have lost a third of what you would have if you're all stocks. And then if you were 20% stock, 80% bonds, you would have actually made 6.2%. So just being understanding what your risk tolerance is, understanding what your investment goals are and your like timeline is very important. And just instead of kind of investing randomly and then not having a good idea of how your portfolio like stands over time, it's important to just like give it a look over and make sure that you're okay with your strategy, because no strategy is inherently right or wrong. but you want to at least make a conscious decision that your asset portfolio is something that you're currently happy with, and regardless of how it turns out with, you won't have any regrets. And that's kind of all I had for this.
It's super interesting. I know Bitcoin's at an all-time high right now, I think. But
Yeah, I'm very conflicted.
I've been in crypto. I got in 2017 in Ethereum and Bitcoin. And I've got the hardware wallets. I just never touched it after that. And so it fell, and I'm
Oh,
like, hey,
nice.
whatever. When I bought it, I had this expectation that it was gonna like fall, and so I just left it there. And now it's an all-time high, and I'm like, do I want to sell or do I want to just hold on to it? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm at right now. But
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
you
because
put,
for me,
go ahead.
I turned like maybe like $1,000 or $2,000 to like $20,000 in the last run, and then I didn't pull any of it out.
Yeah,
And then it crashed back to like 6,000 or something like that, and then I ended up pulling out like like I pulled out a 50% gain, so whatever I invested plus 50% and just left the rest.
yeah,
So it was like $1,000, $2,000, and then just let it sit there until now. And now that like a couple months ago, I saw that it was going back up, so I put in like I was tracking it. As soon as it broke 20,000, I invested another like $100, and then it broke 21,000. I put in like $200, and then I was like looking at the portfolio, and I was like, now it's like overweighted, right? And like logically, I know that that's a bad thing, but like it's very hard to like not be greedy when like you see that opportunity there, right?
yeah. I know.
But trying to learn from my lessons and like knowing like what number would it have to hit where I'm like, if it's like $10,000 or $20,000, is that enough money where I will pull it out and be okay with that, or will I like be upset if I pulled it out? Uh, but that's the thing that I'll be thinking about this week. I still think it's gonna go up a little bit, so I might hold for an extra couple of days. Like I sold 10%, but I don't want to sell like 50% of the portfolio, but we'll see how it goes.
What exchange are you selling it on?
Right now I'm using Coinbase. I don't
That's the
have
one I
my like I
used to
usually
use.
keep my money on like Binance and like actual exchanges,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I have it like split over 2 or 3 exchanges. And then Coinbase, I just found out I could withdraw from to my PayPal. But it cost me $16 to transfer my Bitcoin from Binance to Coinbase, and then Coinbase obviously takes another fee.
Well, how much was
So
that?
that's the thing with $16. It was like a flat fee to send
Oh,
over the
that's not
Bitcoin.
bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad, but like if you're talking like, is this a viable currency to use? And if I have to spend like $16 to e-transfer my friend, like I can't call that viable at this
Yeah,
moment, right?
yeah.
And like if you're using like another coin like Litecoin or like Ethereum, it could be like $8 for transfers, but that's still on the pricier side. So that's why I'm like, the adoption isn't completely there.
Most
So I think it's.
crypto. Sorry, I thought you
Mhm.
finished. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say like, so I don't think like the value is there, the adoption is there for like the price, but just being okay with like what strategy that I want to decide on. Like some people said, just don't add crypto like to your portfolio at all. Like have it on the side as something completely different,
Yeah.
and then just leave it there the whole time. But my thing is, I want to like keep investing. Like, do I want to put 50% of my investment in stocks and crypto, or do I want to do like 75 25? I just need to figure out what kind of asset allocation that I'm happy with.
Hmm.
But that's the name of the game, and trying to figure out what your risk tolerance levels are.
Yeah, right now, like so Coinbase. I remember like fuck, man, when crypto went big in like 2017. I remember like going like picking up my phone at like 4 a.m., seeing what the amount was on Coinbase or the rate, and be like, oh, this is a good one. And I just fucking buy it because you can use your credit card to do it. No, I don't think you can use your credit card anymore for Coinbase, but yeah,
You can
yeah.
technically, but like my credit card charged me like a cash withdrawal fee. I'm like, whoops.
Oh,
So, um, and now I buy through my friend because like my debit card, my like debit Visa doesn't work on the website, so I buy through my friend, and he
mm,
just sends it to me. But he
mm.
buys with his debit card, and like that's the thing. It's very hard to like like invest and withdraw crypto as well. So that's another like factor you have to think about. Like, are you in it for the long game, or you just want to like invest short term?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a long term investment, unless you're really good at like just flipping it, which is fucking risky. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like the one like I don't know if you heard of like Dogecoin that like Elon Musk tweeted and like has doubled in the last 2 days. And I'm like, wow, like, but just trying not to be greedy is
You
the
you
biggest
can't
challenge.
predict those things,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah,
Dogecoin thing.
but I'm like,
Most
is it still gonna go up? Because like that coin is just speculation, and like
Yep.
people just like it so much that people will invest in that hype. And like, I'm just trying to think like, should I play the game again where you try to get in and out quickly, or just like get out early and be okay with that, or do you just stick it out the whole way? Um, that's just like what you have to decide you want to do.
Um. Yeah,
I
that's
think
cool. Thanks. What's that? Sorry.
I was just gonna say I think the longer hold like term game is the best option. I think most people get wrecked trying to time the market.
Hmm.
And I was just gonna say like a lot of the crypto exchanges are like 0.5% fee for either withdrawal or like deposit. From what I've seen, I have a spreadsheet that I can send you guys if you want. Someone put together of most of the Canadian exchanges and their fees and like what coins they carry and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I just want to talk about your like the allocation of assets also. Like, are you familiar with Ray Dalio?
Yeah.
So like he's like the number one. He runs the number one hedge fund for the last couple of years, even though he's done kind of poorly lately. But he still has the number one hedge fund throughout history. And like he says that, just for the record, the average stock market return is about 7%, maybe 10% a year. Um, he says you can increase your rate of return um, without increasing your risk. And so it's like you can invest in Tesla, which is pretty risky, but obviously it has a potential higher rate of return. Um, but he's not talking about that because you're increasing your potential reward, you're still increasing your risk. But he says you can increase your potential reward without increasing your risk by, like you mentioned, diversifying properly. He says that I'm just pulling up the picture here. Um, that if you have like a 60% correlation between all of your stocks, you'll have like, what is it? He has a picture here on Google that you can look for Ray Dalio Holy Grail of investing, and it says basically that like if you have a 60% correlation between say 20 assets, the return to risk ratio is about uh 31%, and the probability of losing money in that given year is 38%. But if you have a 0% correlation, which is kind of impossible in my opinion, but you can still work towards it. It goes from 60% to 40% to 20% to 10% to 0% correlation. Um, at the lowest, the risk to return ratio is about 1.25, and the probability of losing money is 11%. So in comparison, 60% correlation between all your assets, the chance of losing money is 38%, where if it's 0% correlation, the chance of losing money is 11%. So it's about 27% difference. Uh, so yeah, he talks about a lot where it's like you can increase your likelihood of making money without increasing your risk, which in my opinion is like you mentioned, is actually the holy grail. Um, you don't have to go pick like technology stocks or like these stocks which inherently increase your risk because you're chasing higher rewards. You can literally not increase your risk and do nothing just by like picking like having zero correlation. But again, that's pretty freaking hard to do too. Um, and I also feel like most of it in some way is indirectly inherited, like sorry, correlated.
So it's about diversifying your portfolio, like the companies and things that you're investing in. That what the
As
correlation
as
is.
well as yes, as well as you can, where it's like almost zero correlation.
I see. Yeah, so I kind of run that exercise at the beginning of every year. I mean, this year was a little different because Corona hit, and actually I did it at the beginning. Then I just sold whatever I had a profit on. But yeah, before that, I would in like before the end of January, I would sit down, look at all the investments I was in, what return I got overall, and then I would sell off the ones that I was like, okay, I don't want to be in this long term, and then I would look at, okay, how much of my investments are in technology stocks, how much are in healthcare, and all that kind of stuff. So I did try to do that a little bit, but again, I still had maybe like 60% in technology. So
And
the correlation was pretty high there.
just for the record, Warren Buffett kind of says the opposite of what Ray Dalio says. Warren Buffett says that you should just stick to a couple stocks that you know very well. He
Mm.
calls it his circle of competence, and that you should only stay in there. And a lot of he says this a lot too. His famous analogy is like, you know, in baseball they can throw 1,000 balls at you. All you need to do is hit once to be successful. To be like rich. So he'll wait all day for like all these amazing deals to pass him. He'll literally just go after the literal best that he understands and that he thinks is the best opportunity.
Mm.
But he says stay in your circle of competence. So it's two very uh kind of opposing views.
It's cool.
Yeah, and like I would agree. Like I agree with the like you definitely want to diversify because when you diversify, you lower your unsystematic risk. So there's like the unsystematic and systematic risk, and like one of them is the risk you get from like not diversifying, like having all your eggs in one basket. But then there's also systemic risk, which is like just the risk of like investing in a higher risk asset, like the difference between investing in treasury bills and like stocks essentially. So that one is something that you can't kind of diversify out of. That's just like what you accept by going more risky. And then that's just something that you gotta figure out. And then I think you can get zero correlation between your stocks because you can also have like negative correlation where like if one stock goes down, the other
Right?
one goes up. So if you balance those over, you can get a zero. It's just like very tricky.
That
Um,
makes sense.
and then like Dave, how you were diversifying throughout different industries. So like you're picking stocks that are in different industries, so you're diversifying your industrial risk, but your asset risk is still the same because you're still all in like you're still all in stocks, for
Mm.
example, right? Like you wouldn't have diversified your asset allocation. Like
Mhm.
you would do that by getting like bonds or maybe like buying gold or like real estate, something like
Yeah,
that.
well, real estate's a
So like
different conversation, but you're right.
Crypto.
The crypto,
like
I just left it in, but no, you're right. Like the
yeah,
bonds and the gold game, I didn't touch at all, so I need to look into that.
yeah. And then like Warren Buffett, I was also looking at like his cash holdings because I'm very interested in like if there's a recession, like how do the best people kind of like diversify that and like looking at like how much money that he invests in like cash and cash equivalents like has jumped this year. So like his cash on hand has dropped because I imagine that he bought through the dip, but it's actually like he has a lot of T-bills right now. And he says he has like a lot of T-bills and like which is essentially like a risk-free cash. It's like it's like buying a bond from the government. So it's like the most secure thing. It usually gives you a return of like 0.9%, like very little return over a year, but it's supposed to be risk free. And he has all of that because he says in a recession he wants to have like like security mode where like if he needs the cash he has it and like because once like if there's ever a recession you want to have that cash on hand when other people don't. So I thought that was interesting. And then if you're interested in what he's actually holding in Berkshire Hathaway, um, like out of his 270 billion holdings, 128 billion is in Apple. His next biggest is Bank of America with 31 billion, and then it's like all the big companies like Coca-Cola, American Express, Kraft, and like a lot of banks. So like Warren Buffett is very like as you said, like he holds Apple like a huge part of it because he
Which is
So,
trusts them and
ironic.
like
sorry, you were cutting out just there. Just a heads up.
oh sorry yeah I would say like his holdings are like quite big but like Apple's the biggest company so like he it's almost like the idea of getting an S&P 500
Mm.
but those are like his thing is also like you buy companies that you never want to sell that you're okay with holding like throughout the dips so he's never worried about like selling the companies because he believes in every one of them.
Apple and Facebook have been two stocks that have treated me very well in the last 4 years. That's all I'll say. Um,
Yeah, like I think like my thing is like is everyone has to take a different like strategy to their like investing, and like the average person should probably just go with like a regular S&P 500 like total like US or total Canadian equities fund, or like an ETF. But I was thinking if I can pick industries better and then pick ETFs in those industries, I can kind of diversify my risk while still trying to like outperform the market, which is probably bad advice and like probably something I'll regret in 5 years, but something that I would like to do now. Or like I believe that technology and AI, the like with my last paycheck, I put some money towards like robotics, like a robotics ETF that buys a lot of like different robotics companies. And I'm like, because I think like those, like as you mentioned, like how quickly robotics grows and AI is growing, people don't realize. So I think like I'm okay with like putting a bet on that while still having most of my money in like a grander total US equities ETF, but still putting those like 5-10% bets on certain industries that I think should be overexposed to.
mhm. And being okay with losing that money.
Exactly. Like if you're not okay with losing that money, then you should take a different strategy that is better with your risk tolerance.
Yeah. Cool. Um, I guess I'll go. Unless there's something else, Soroy or anyone else wanted to kind of um, chime in
Oh,
on,
I'm
or
good.
yeah, cool. So I'll talk about kind of question of belief real quick. So towards the end, beginning slash end of beginning of this week, last slash end of last week, um, in the boot camp that Naz and I are in, again Nietzsche started talking about like religion a little bit, and so so it was like he started by saying, what if God, because Christianity was the biggest religion, especially in the Western culture. Um, and he said, what if God was our biggest, like, our most persistent lie? And what if it was something, or the notion of God or a higher being was only created kind of like what Naz was saying, as something to strive towards, like heaven was something to strive towards to give our lives a little bit of direction and meaning. Then he started talking about like science and like kind of again like first he starts off by saying that religion is something good that gives people meaning and direction in their life, but then he says, well, what if God could just be one of the human beings or humankind's most persistent lies, so we need to keep that in mind as well. Then he goes and says that there were some things that he noticed, especially in the Western culture, as they started adopting a more scientific approach to the meaning of life and all that stuff, that started overtaking religion and Christianity, especially in the Western culture. And he said that this is also evident in art. So art started off as like a portrayal of like beauty of nature or like the heavens or of man flourishing. So you'd see a man or woman. He just says man, um, kind of like happy and like uplifting and all that stuff. Then around the time that science started taking over, he says that art started changing as well to show kind of the darker side of life. And you see like that's like scary, very awkward, and like almost kind of like emotionally intrusive art. And so he says that as a result, it could be believed that like the anxiety and depression and that kind of stuff, and like the different mentalities we talked about, like the slave mentality, that sort of stuff became more and more prominent as a result, because again, nihilism and like different kind of things branching off from that, people saying that my life has no meaning, what's the point, and that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, I'm never going to be great, I'm just destined to be like a person and then die, and then that's it. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. Like he just kind of questions every angle of it, not saying that science is bad, but not saying that religion is good or bad or any of that kind of stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. um another part of the boot camp was kind of interesting, and it talks about adopting, like, everyone's got a good and evil side, right? That's an inevitability. We all have this kind of demon within us, that inhibits different evil habits and characteristics. And Nietzsche says that you shouldn't, like, in order to grow to the best version of yourself, a lot of people think that you just, like, only encourage the good and just swallow the bad and ignore it and suppress it. And actually, he says that that's actually not healthy and it's not good for your development as a person, because that shadow self, is what he calls it, is actually a part of who you are. So he says that, again, like, the whole moral dilemma of good or bad is a societal kind of definition, but he was saying that you should entertain that shadow self at least a little bit, so that, one, it gets a little bit of fresh air to come out every now and then, and two, you get to understand who you really are, right? Because then when you understand that side of yourself, you're able to kind of counteract it a little bit, or learn to include it in your life in a healthy way, rather than suppressing it and then it coming out in a like a tragic way. So I thought that was interesting. So the main thing I wanted to talk about, and again, like, we talked about this earlier, like, before we started, one of the things that was just kind of entertaining was, like, oh, hey, like, what if I wrote a book? Because I think I can, my written word is decent, like, I can write pretty well. And by the way, if anyone needs to proofread their stuff, send it over to me. I'm happy to help. And another thing was, I've always wanted to create, like, a script for, like, a movie or, like, a story or something like that. So then on the Secret Entourage website, they have different interviews with different entrepreneurs and successful folks. And so this guy I've never heard of, his name's Kimanzi Constable. He wrote his most popular book was Are You Existing or Are You Living? And so I just wanted to kind of talk about his story real quick, because I thought it was interesting. And so he started as like at the age of 19 delivering bread to people's houses, and this was, again, early 2000s ish, right? And so he's delivering bread, and then he remembered, like, he worked in a company, so he had to wear a certain uniform, and he would see some bread delivery folks not wearing a uniform, and he'd go up to them and be like, yo, like how come you're not wearing a uniform, like, what's up with that? And they're like, oh, I own a franchise and I do this for myself, so I own the business. And he's like, oh, that's kind of cool, like, I want to know what are the benefits of it. So obviously there's more money, you get to choose your own schedule, you get to hire people, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. So he's like, oh, that's interesting, how much does it cost? And they're like, yeah, you need about $250,000. And he's like, okay, well, there's no way I'm gonna get that anytime soon. So he started talking more to these independent contractors, and he found out that they actually some of them hadn't taken vacation in 13 years, and they were working 7 days a week. So he was like, what the hell? Like, why are you doing that? Like, I thought the idea of owning your own business means that you have a little bit more freedom. And like, no, that's not the case, man. I'm working harder than I would, when I work for someone else. And so a niche that he identified was that a lot of these independent contractors kind of talked to one another, and they all had a common problem, and was that they all needed someone to cover their vacations. So he's like, hey, I'll cover your vacation, like, and he started with one guy. He helped him out, and the guy was like, oh, yo, you did a solid job. I know some other folks that could use you to cover their vacations. And so he kind of created his own business doing that, and he started making like $55,000 a year when he was 19 years old. It then grew to $500,000 annually, but then he was still in the truck at midnight, getting like 3 hours of sleep. He wasn't focused on growing the business, so that, because he was involved in it so much, and it was hard for him to make like kids practices and stuff like that. And he's like, man, I can't do this, right? Then the company got bought out, so his company got bought out, and there's a lot of changes, and he was actually afraid that he wouldn't have a job anymore. So he was like, shit, like, well, I'm good at writing. Let me start journaling everything. So he started journaling everything, and he wrote a book for the working man. Like, when he started journaling, he's like, maybe I could just convert this into a book for like a family man, a working man. And actually, sorry, he just created the book. So I kind of gave a spoiler alert to later on. That was his target audience that he didn't know about. In the beginning, he just wrote what he felt, journaling his stuff, and he knew that there was a woman, I think Amanda Hawken. She sold like 1 million copies 3 times or something like that, or collectively. She was a self-published author. So he looked at that and he's like, why can't I do that? So then he launched his book, put it online, and started like writing vlogs and stuff like that. And he sold 5 copies in 6 months. And he bought 2, and his friends bought 3, and he was just like, man, this isn't for me. I want to give up. So right was he was like at that point in time, he's just like, you know what? He was doing it on the side. He was doing the bread business. Like it was bought out, but he was still working in it. And he was like, you know what? I'm just gonna focus on the bread business, man. That's what I know. It's a safer bet. This failed. I'm not gonna do it. He got an email from someone who was reading his vlog who told him that they appreciated the content, and because of it, they were gonna quit their job. So he reached out to that guy, that one person, and was like, hey man, let's talk about this real quick. And so he got on a call with the guy, and he told him not to quit his job, right? And he instead understood where the guy was coming from, and then walked him through what his best next options were. And so then he realized, he's like, yo man, just me helping that guy out made me feel good. I did it for free. And then more and more people started coming to him with that kind of stuff, because he started talking about people, and then he vlogged about it. And then he started saying, you know what, I can start writing things for people, specifically the family man and the struggles that I personally went through. And so then things started coming in for him. And 4 months later, I think he sold like 20,000 copies or something like that. And a publisher approached him, and they published the book. And one of his biggest accomplishments was after that popped off and he got the book published, he took his like 80-year-old grandpa to Barnes and Nobles, and like he showed him his book that was on the shelf, and he goes, look grandpa, I wrote this, right? So then he started getting some speaking engagements. He got his first one, and he was a bit of an introvert, and they offered to pay. So he said, you know what, let me do it. And he bombed it. They told him, hey listen, you weren't the best speaker, but we liked your content. So then he started getting some other gigs internationally, and he ended up scaling that too. So he did 12 countries in 12 states. That's kind of what he said, the amount of speaking engagements he's done. And then he also identified that during the years selling bread, he picked up a lot of really bad habits. And again, one of them was focusing on the business too much, or sorry, focusing on the day-to-day too much, so that he couldn't expand the business. And then the other thing he said was he gained 170 pounds. For the book, when he started doing like recently was that he started working out. This was like, I think like mid 2010s ish. He started working out and stuff like that, and then going like right before the interview, he had gone for an 8-mile run. He's like, I've lost 160 pounds to date, so I feel pretty good about myself. And so during the years, for the book, the first step was getting clear on who his audience was. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes I'm getting into. So originally he said he wanted to reach the whole world, but then he realized that if you try to reach the whole world, you're not gonna hit anyone. So he said, let me focus on, and again, that single instance of the individual reaching out to him opened his eyes to, I'm just going to speak to different folks that are exactly in this guy's shoes, because those are the shoes that I was in, and I can really speak to and relate to it. So his audience was a family man, and he wanted to hone in on the content and then focus on the marketing. He did the opposite before. He just put something together and just started focusing on the marketing, and it didn't really do much. Another thing that I learned from it was guest posting was a big thing for him. This was very relevant even nowadays for if you're looking to grow a page on any social media or even on Twitch. You want to be a guest on people that are, like, if you can get people that are super well entrenched in the ecosystem and very popular, great. But at the very least, just look for people who are more successful than you are. And it doesn't have to be like 100,000. It could be like 2,000 or whatever, right? And so for him, writing vlogs as a guest on other people's websites was a big thing for him, and that's what started really helping him scale. And so he would reach out to people that were bigger than him, offer to write content for their page, and they would put a link to his blog, and he would put a link to their blog, so it was synergetic in that way. And he said the other thing was, when you reach out to people that are bigger than you, do it genuinely, because people see through the sugar coating. So when you just go like, hey, I love your content, like, can I be a guest? Like, they see right through that. So he says, tell them clearly what your intentions are. It's like, hey, I really think that I can speak to your audience and provide value to them because your audience is very similar to mine. Specifically tell them which of their posts resonated with you and why, and show them examples of what content you want to put out on their page and why it would relate to their audience. He also says that you should send 2 to 3 pieces of sample content to increase the chances. Because if you just send one, be like, this is the article I want to send, they might not like the idea. But if you send 3, they might not like 2, but resonate with 1. And then if you can, show them other pieces of work that you've done with other people. It's like, hey, I've been featured on this magazine. Hey, I did. Even if they're smaller folks, it's like, hey, I'm already getting known in this ecosystem with these other individuals that are not as big as you, but look at the stuff that I've written for them. Then the other things he said was he talked about working with a publisher versus being self-published, and he went with the publisher route. Well, obviously in the beginning he went self-published, but then he went with the publisher route for the sole reason of the amount of reach that they could get, because his goal wasn't to make money doing this. His goal was to help as many people as possible and gain as much traction as possible and gain a large audience. So what he did was he knew that working with a publisher would give him more reach and more sales. And there's this thing called BookScan where you can check how well and how many sales that you're getting on your book. And the more that you get, the more likely a publisher is to reach out to you. So that's what happened to him. There's obviously going to be more profit when you go self-published, but you sell more with a publisher. So then his game plan was to sell as much as he could with the publisher, and then obviously if they had a contract to be like, hey, like we need you to sell 2 more books, right, write 2 more books on, and we're gonna publish it for you, that's fine. But once that contract was done, then he can evaluate, hey, do I want to self-publish this using the leverage that I've gained with the publisher, or do I want to continue working with them or work with another publisher? So I thought that was interesting. Again, like I don't really know much about that kind of stuff. It was just cool to hear about his story, how he went from being a bread delivery man to someone who started helping the average family man in their problems and struggles. But yeah, that's what I had for this week. You guys still there?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, what do you think? Whose turn was it to ask a question for the week?
Oh fuck, I think it was mine. I completely forgot.
Can you think of one?
What was the question again? What
No,
was?
last week it was what's your favorite movie series?
Oh right, what question?
I got a question if you want to go next week.
Sure, I'll defer.
The question I asked myself this morning when I was thinking about it was like, what's the number that I need to retire for the rest of my life?
Huh.
Or like
10
what's
million for me.
and then like is that based off of like your because like I was gonna go through it by saying like how much money do I need to live? Like and then if I can assume like a 4 or 5% return, like because if you can get like I think the average 4% is like the very conservative return you can expect from your portfolio in retirement. Like 4% of 10 million, how much is that? Is that
That's
like
400K a year.
400K a year? Like so then is that because like I haven't got to that part where like then you have to assume like what's the how much do you think you need to spend a year? Because I think
Right.
for me in retirement, I'll still be working on like projects that I care about, but I just don't need them to generate money, right? Because I want to like, I guess what your goal is like I've been thinking more like, do I want to retire earlier or later with more money? So I think like that's the question I'm asking myself. But see you've already thought about this one.
It's a good
Yeah,
question. Yeah.
the only thing is when I say 10 million, I don't take into account making any more money on top of that. I'm just saying 10 million in the bank based off the fact that if I do live for another 100 years, that's 100K a year. I can operate solely my family, like I can operate solely off that. Um, but like you said, if you're gonna like still generate money in the stock market, even at like 4%, personally, I think $2 million would do it. That'd be 80K a year.
So I just did the calculation myself, and yeah, 4% off 2.5 million in the bank would give me 100,000 per year, and I feel that would be good enough to live off of. In an extravagant way, of course.
Agreed.
I don't know if I can give a number. Like I feel like even if I had $100 million, I wouldn't stop working.
But I guess like retiring doesn't mean you're not working.
Yeah,
It
it's
What
just
does
just
that
not
means that
mean then?
you
independent.
will quit if you're not enjoying what you're doing.
But then why do something if you're not enjoying what you're doing?
I think that's most people's jobs currently. Or
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
what's
I think I
No, so I guess the question for you, Dave, is if you have 5 million in the bank, are you still going to work for your company you're working at now?
I know if I had 5 million in the bank, I probably didn't get that by working for someone else, right?
you could if you saved and invested and got lucky. Like,
Well,
Yeah,
if you won the lotto tomorrow and won $5 million, would you still work at your current job?
yeah.
Actually,
I would be unchanged.
okay.
I would probably, because again, the reason I'm at my current job right now is because I made a promise to the GM that, hey, like, I'm not gonna leave until I leave my impact here, and that's gonna be maybe a year or two. But if I find an alternative, then I'm out. And an alternative wouldn't be another job. It would be, hey, if I have a means of starting something of my own. And he's like, hey
Hmm.
man, that's all good. You know what I mean? So I'm not at this company for the money. I'm there to, really just get the experience that I want to get, and then get that sales director title under my belt and understand how to operate, like a budget for a company starting out locally, right? But yeah, again, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I wouldn't stop working. I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know. And now that as I'm talking it through, like maybe if I won the lottery, where I stop work, I think if I won the lottery, then I wouldn't need the recurring money that would be coming in. So I'd just be like, yeah, I'm gonna look for a project that I can work on myself and use this kind of nest egg to do that. I don't
so
know,
then
man.
what's the number that you have to win in the lottery for you to be okay with making that jump?
So that's not
Right? Because
retiring
if you
then.
win, if you win, if you
No,
win
it's not
50,000
retiring.
in the lottery, um, it's very different than if you win 100 million in the lottery, right? Because there's the
Yeah.
number that matters.
Like, look. So again, but that's not retiring though. So that I
No.
would be using if I won the lottery, I would be using
I
that
think.
time to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So I wouldn't classify that as retiring. But yeah, like if I won, like right now, if I won, you know, $5 million, then yeah, I'd probably just be like, hey man, like I'm just gonna spend my time fucking figuring out how to invest this and make as much money as I'm doing right now, and then build something that I want to continue building. But if we're talking about later on, like when I'm 60, 70 years old, how much money would I need in the bank account to stop working? I don't know. Um, if I wanted to just throw a number out, like $1 billion would be nice. You know what I mean? Like that would be great. You know what I mean? To be able to say I'm a billionaire, right? But I don't know. I don't know if I would just
But
stop working. Pardon me?
sorry, you're not saying for someone to literally just become a bum, right? You just mean leave their current like financial situation,
I thought it was to
Yeah.
their
So
retire.
like,
their quote
I don't
unquote
know
job.
if you've heard of like the term, like it's like almost like I believe it's semi-retired, where like you quit whatever you're doing, and like usually when you semi-retire, you usually start working in like a couple months or a couple years, right? Once you get bored of like doing nothing. But it's that number that you need to like take a break if you needed it, and be okay with like, because like if you pick a number, right? Like it's like what are the costs that you think that you want to spend in retirement, and then you multiply that by whatever return you think you can get on your investments. Um, and then if like let's say that like you think you need $50,000 to retire and you think you make 4%, like if you can get like a portfolio that's big enough to manage that, um, what and then you figure out like, well, you'd only start working if you actually enjoyed it enough to not do nothing, right?
Hmm.
Because like I don't think anyone retires and then never does anything again if they retire early, right? Like
Yeah.
I think most people need to do something over
Right.
time. Um, if like it could just be like writing the book, right? Like you could just become an author or like
Oh,
a
okay.
project thing like that, right?
Yeah.
Where like you have potential to make money, but you're not worried about if you make money because
I
you
see.
need it.
Okay, okay. Okay, great. Um okay, if you're making $400,000 a year off a 4% investment, which is a very conservative number, how much of that are you getting taxed on? Half of it?
Yeah.
So then
Uh,
you're only making 200,000. That 200,000 liquid's not bad.
Yeah, because it's whatever. And I mean, it depends how you pull it out, right?
Yeah, how you write it off.
If it's in a TFSA, like technically you can pull it out tax free. If it's
Yeah,
in an
but then
RRSP, then you gotta
that's
pay
tough.
taxes.
Like to have 10
Yeah,
million in
exactly.
your TFSA means you grew $70,000 to $10 million in that
Yeah.
account, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
you're
like
right.
you made it in real estate and deposited in there because that's illegal. Um,
Right.
so let's just assume that you're gonna have to pay 50% tax on it. So you're actually living off $200,000 a year. I mean, dude, like I think regardless of how much money we all make, we'll be okay. Like we'll figure it out. But if you want to be comfortable, yeah, I think 10 million is a good number. Like
But
just
sorry, I thought the question was leave your quote unquote job. So even though like I would have like a dollar value that I leave my quote unquote job for, I
Mhm.
would still try to strive to make like $100 million or $1 billion.
Right. Different
But
goal. You have like your retirement number, and then you have like your end, like a number you still strive for. Because like
correct.
I agree, like just because you're retired doesn't mean you want to stop making money. You
yeah,
can still, if you want, like if you are interested in like, creating or generating wealth, like that makes sense. But for me, it's like, could I live off like? Because right now I'm tracking my expenses, and I spend around like 32,000 a year, like because like it's an average, not great, right?
right.
But based off current spending off like the last like 18 months, like around 32,000, and I'm completely happy with this life. Like the lifestyle is something that I'm comfortable with, where like I have everything I want in terms of like needs, like car, house. Like those are the two things that
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, those are two things that are like unnegotiable for me. Everything else I can like kind of live without. So at 32,000, if I'm making like 4 or 5%, like the portfolio that I need isn't too big. And then the second number and like the second part of the question is what age do you want to retire at? And then you have to figure out how much do I have to invest and what return to hit that, right? Um, so that's something that I've been thinking about this,
Hmm.
because let's say that you want to like hit like 100 million. Do you want to retire at 40 or 50? And then like how much do you have to like invest at like 10, like how much per month you have to invest into it, at what like rate of return, like are you averaging like a 7% or 10% return on your money, and like graphing it out, and like do you look like you're gonna hit that, like
Mm.
and then playing with the numbers until you create a plan, right? That's been my biggest thing, is creating like the plan or like the budget, and then just as long as you stick to it, if you've created the plan that hits your goal number, then you have nothing to worry about in the short term.
Hmm. It's interesting. I used to think this way. Then the boot camp told me not to think this way. But it's also important to at least think this way a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Just to keep track. So yeah, you know what? Give me until next week. I'll give you an answer. Well, I'll give you an answer before that, before the everyone else. So the age and the number, right, is what you're looking at. Like the age for
Yeah, and
retirement and
then
the
what
number that you'll require.
yeah, and then look at like what's the monthly contribution return. Like just throw it into like a compound calculator
Mm-hmm.
and kind of look at it. Or if you want, you can do it in like Excel, and then you can do like, cuz my thing is like I expect to be making more money in the future, right? Like later into your career, you should like, if as long as you're like a high value employee and you're constantly learning, like you should be making more money as you develop through your career.
Yeah.
So maybe like create stages, like in the next 5 years, I can safely assume I can invest X amount, and then being like in the next stage of my career, I can expect like maybe a 5-10% bump up, or like whatever you're comfortable with like doing, right? And then being like how many phases, like, and then create your timeline, and creating like some kind of financial like model for your retirement goal.
Mm.
I have a question though.
Go for it.
Do you think that it's reasonable to generate a lot of wealth through the stock market?
Reasonable in what way? Like, is it
Um,
possible or is it a
Like
good?
ethically, or yeah, like
yeah,
feasible.
no, well, yeah, ethically, but like, um, uh, you know, assuming that none of us are millionaires right now, like, and the fact that we can't retire today, can we use our current wealth, deployed into the stock market to retire in say 5 or 10 years, do you think? with our level of skill in the stock market.
With level of skill,
Not
no.
not even skill, just capital. We wouldn't have enough money to invest to create a large
Yep.
enough return for 5 to 10 years. Like,
No,
Yep.
I don't know
because like
though.
as we mentioned, it's the compound interest that you want to like bank on. Like you need like 20, 30 years or
Correct.
40 years market to really hit that. But like, are you okay with working 40 years? That's another question you have to ask yourself because like as you said, like you're completely happy working at your current job. Like even if you had money, you would probably still work there for 1 or 2 years to like
That's right.
to achieve what you set there to achieve. So just because your retirement age is 60, that's not the worst thing either. And you can always retire early if you hit it big somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to like think about like the different vehicles for like the greatest wealth generation. And I don't think the stock market is that. I think it's more of a
Real estate,
like
no.
yeah, real estate entrepreneurship, um even like just becoming like masterful at a skill, which is like your job or maybe something you do on the side, like a musician or something like that. But I think stock market in terms of producing wealth is probably lower on the ranks. I think it's more to
It's
preserve for your wealth than it is to actually get wealthy compared uh to get like even in your job, you're probably gonna get like even if you don't get a pay increase, you're still doubling your return every year, basically. Is that true or is that not a true statement?
Wait, what do
If
you
you
mean
make
depending.
doubling your?
so if I spent a year like just studying the stock market and I put 60K into that stock market, the next year to make 100% return, it's probably not likely, even though I spent a year of my time studying the stock market.
Correct.
And again, I'm just talking about the average skill level. So, but if I spent that other year doing that job that got me that 60K to just get that 60K again next year, like that's 100% return, is it? I don't know if I'm framing
No,
that
but then
right.
you
Is
get
that
taxed on that 100%, that 60K though, no?
you get
But you
taxed
also
on both?
don't need to study. Like you can also invest while you're working.
Yeah, I'm just trying to identify if like the best wealth generating vehicle. And I just don't think the stock market is obviously you can do everything
In
together
tandem,
and
yeah.
just individually. I don't think the stock market really compares to a lot of
I don't think
stuff
so
where
either. I've heard elsewhere, and I need to do refresh my research on it. That yeah, like um, actually, I saw something about this. It listed off them, and the stock market wasn't the top one either. It was real estate
But
or
it's the safest one, I would assume. Like
yeah, it's the
real
it's
estate
yeah
is the
safest
yeah
and
best
most
yeah
one.
passive,
yeah.
most passive. Yeah,
It's like the fallback plan. Like assuming you like, of course, I would agree. Like creating a company is probably the highest potential one. But like not everyone can create like a unicorn like Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
yep,
Um, but like anyone can invest in the stock market. There's no like barrier to entry. You can buy an ETF for like $35. Like, and you can do that like as a backup plan. Like even if you do like if you create the plan and stick to it, like you could create generational like you could retire with like
I
you can
agree.
easily retire with 7 figures or like $1 million
Yep,
by the time you're 65, assuming you never made it with your entrepreneurial thing. You never generated a skill that became highly monetizable or like a high value. Like even if you failed everything else, if you stuck to the plan with the market, you should like looking historically and like how like if you believe the market should go up,
yep,
you should be okay, even if you messed everything else up. So it's that fallback plan. But should it be the only plan? No, I would disagree. I would say like you should always try to like learn new skills to monetize, right? Or be able
agreed.
to provide value. But I wouldn't
Yeah,
say they're exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive.
yeah. Don't get me wrong. I personally think every single person should own an ETF and just don't look at it for like at least 40 years. In that sense, you could probably generate a couple 100,000, if not like $1 million, depending on how much you put in. If you do keep doing it like yearly and stuff like that, I definitely agree. You should be in the stock market in some sort of form, uh, uh, especially for the very, very freaking long term. But just in terms of like trying to like get rich, without like being Warren Buffett's age. It's just like, what do you what do you think is the best vehicle? And I would say just real estate or like some sort of like entrepreneur, real business, I guess. But
Mm. Yeah, I'm just
because
googling.
I
It's,
always thought like the stock market, you know, freaking like get a couple of Teslas and you can be okay. But man, that those type of people are like those people are very rare. Like those guys like master and study the market, and they're still not very consistent, but like they're well ahead of like the average person. And those are the guys that like Warren Buffett says like you just need three good stocks and you pretty much set for life. Those are the only people that I feel like can do that. Everyone else has to stick to like ETF rate of return, and it can't get more complicated than that.
I think like one thing that I know this goes around a lot. You've probably seen some infographics on it. It's like the average millionaire has 7 sources of income, right? So I think it's about making sure that you're learning all of
Agreed.
those things, like learning about a 401k slash an RRSP, learning about the TFSA, learning about the stock market, learning about real estate, that kind of stuff. I've even seen other things about people domain hustling. So they'll buy a domain, hold on to it, and then flip it. And like that was a thing. Obviously, not so much now, but it was really big in the early 2000s, um, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. It was a good question. Start up
Very
a
good
good
question.
conversation. Me personally, though, the most that I've accumulated would be through real estate, and that wasn't the case until this year. But prior to that, it was earning an income and doing stocks on the side. So I was making some good returns on my RSPs. My TFSA is gone. Actually, no. If you count my TFSA, it's all canceled it out. So yeah, um,
So,
yeah,
the only way I was able to double X amount of money in my life was through real estate as well.
yeah. So yeah, I would not underestimate the real estate. And like the real estate market, you only really lose when there's like a if you kind of know what you're doing or know someone that knows what they're doing. You only really lose when there's like a common crash. Stock market, you fucking lose whenever. You know what I mean? Like because
Hmm.
it's like there's common crashes, but also micro crashes for certain stocks, right? And like I think real estate's a more of a safe investment because like all it takes is just one person who like a bunch of individuals like the institution sell off a bunch of the shares and then the whole fucking like the market for that stock crashes. um does that make sense?
Yep.
Is that 2008 or is that a different?
No, just in general for like
Like,
stocks, like if someone
yeah.
just if an
They
institution
just want to
says
dump.
we're just going to dump this after hours, then like it drives the share price down, inflates the market's amount of the share because so supply and demand. Then us regular investors are like, oh fuck, like my portfolio just tanked because all my weed stocks just went down, but my technology stocks are doing great. Versus real estate, it's like how often do you hear, hey, the Vancouver market just crashed and the Toronto, good thing I've like a Toronto investment, like that. I don't really hear of that. You know what I mean? It's like it's either across the board or it's like give or take a few percent here and there. um I
That's
don't
why I
know.
like going with like a total U.S. equities or like an S&P 500 ETF. Kind of hedges you against that kind of risk.
Mm.
And then the only risk you have is like a full market recession, similar to like a full market crash
Which is
or a housing
very rare.
crash.
Yeah, that's very rare. But again, but then when you do that, your returns aren't the greatest either, right? It's like, well, like what would the S&P make us? Like 4%, 5% a year?
7 on average.
Wow, that's actually not bad.
But even then, I think real estate goes up.
It's way more than that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, it's way
trying to
more than that.
remember.
Like
Oh, I
literally.
had one question about that.
What's that?
How does like housing insurance work? Like, let's say there's like an earthquake or a tornado and my house gets blown to pieces or something. Am I covered and how?
I think there's actually a clause in insurance that says they don't pay against
Natural
God.
disasters?
Yeah, but I thought I heard the word they used the word like God something events, but
Acts of God. But
yeah,
but so I was doing some insurance work recently, and a sewage flood, for example, is covered for my commercial policy, but the deductible is 25K. So if the damage is anything less than 25K, then it's up to me to fix it without going through insurance. And for other big ticket items, there are a high there is a high deductible. And for some things, it depends where you live if it's covered or not. For example, I know some family friends who got a property that's around the lake, and in order to insure it against the lake, the premium's almost double, like 10 grand instead of 5 grand. So it's kind of a policy by policy, place by place thing.
Because I was also thinking, like, if global warming is going to cause more natural disasters, is housing more risky or less risky?
I don't know. Like it depends on
I
the
guess-
market, right? Like
I think
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into Florida because they're getting fucked with
They're going to
tornado.
flood.
Yeah, they're gonna
Yeah.
flood,
They're
right?
going to be underwater in
Yeah.
30 years.
But I think
flooding.
Miami, New York, same
Toronto's
thing.
fine. Like you know what I mean? Like
I think Canada, like,
was that sorry? I don't know if you cut out or you just stopped your thought. Nice. Yeah. I don't hear.
Might probably stop working.
Yeah.
But I think real estate's kind of like Bitcoin. The reason it's going up and it always will go up is because it's a finite resource. So like,
Yeah, people always need
there's
a
always
place to live, right?
yeah, and there's only so much places you can live.
Yeah.
It's
It's a good conversation though.
Yep.
Cool. So, wait, Cobus, what is this that you sent me here? Pay minimum wage. What is this link? Minimum wages in Australia. Changes to casual and overtime award clauses. This is up Andrew's alley from an economist's perspective. I'm thinking you might be able to get all of these guys to calculate how much they would be paid for minimum wage in Australia next time. That's interesting. Why is that, Cobus? Cool. So, guys, anything from the squad before we break?
I think we covered it.
Yeah. Well, cool.
It's a lot.
Hey, I just wanted to join in and
Oh.
say Happy New Year to you guys. I came in late, but just wanted to wish you a good week.
Ruben,
Happy
thanks,
New
man.
Year, bro.
Happy New Year, buddy. Hope the flight was
No
okay.
problem. No problem. No, I'm about to get to the airport.
Oh, okay, nice. All
Yeah, I
right.
had to get ready. Yeah.
Safe flight, man. Hope it goes
Thanks. I'll see you guys soon.
well. Sure.
Fly
Hopefully.
safe. Take care.
Cool.
Trip.
All right, folks. We'll catch you guys later. Have a good week. Start those habits. Don't give up on the resolutions, and it's not too late to create one. Who cares if it's after January 1st? Just start some good habits ASAP. Cool. Peace, guys.
Take care, guys. Happy New Year.